Hey, good evening, everybody. We're looking at Tuesday here, and got a beautiful sunset out there. As you can see, conditions are pretty warm out there. We hit the lower 80s today where I'm at. I think my thermometer may be reading a little bit high, but we are in an area of very warm air. And there it is. You can see that there. That's the temperature anomaly chart. And this kind of gives us an idea where the air masses are. The blue is where it's colder than normals, and red is where it's above normal. So we can kind of look for the front from the Great Lakes area down into the Central Plains, and a warm front way up near James Bay. And this can be of a lot of help when you're forecasting fronts out in the western U.S. We can see temperatures are kind of warm out here in the Great Basin area. So possibly something like that with with westerly wind coming on shore. Low out here, yeah, that kind of adds up. So I might go with that for just a preliminary look at the conditions there. Let me bring up the thickness chart here. That's gotten to be kind of a ritual. We do that every evening. Bring up the NAM panel for isobars and thickness. And here it comes. Kind of looks a little bit like what we had yesterday. We have kind of a stagnant pattern going on because of the blocking out there in Alaska. Remember, we have kind of like a ridge out to the west and a trough to the east. We've been locked in that pattern for about a good 1 or 2 weeks. So as a result, yeah, we're seeing maybe something like a front through the Midwest here, and a lot of warm air advection over Texas and Oklahoma. That's pushed the warm front up north. You can see some very tight packing here in Wyoming and Montana. So we'll bring that front up there. But it looks like we pick up more of that packing out in California. So maybe they're behind the front. Might be looking for something like that. So that's our first guess. We can see that the center of the baroclinicity is in Wyoming here. And the core of the polar air, that's up in Manitoba and Saskatchewan. You can see that that cold air advection coming right into Minnesota and the Great Lakes. So finishing that off, we probably got a little bit of an occlusion there, and maybe a warm front out in New England like that. Okay, anything coming on shore in the Pacific? Looks pretty quiet. Just looks like a little bit of cold air out in the Pacific. So we're going to get kind of a break in California for maybe at least a couple of days here. These are the high temperatures we had in Texas. And give me just a moment here. Alrighty, we're back here, and you can see 80s there on the Edwards Plateau. We've got kind of a warm day. Remember, we had 101 down here in Mexico, so there's definitely a lot of warm air just to the south. And we know that we've got moisture off to the south also, down south of Texas. So that's going to kind of play into the weather this weekend. You can kind of trace out where the cold front is and through the plains. We've got 68 there at St. Louis. That's pretty warm for this time of year, and that contrasts sharply with these 30s and 40s in Iowa. Front is a little bit less well defined out in the western states, but we can see 70 at Phoenix, 61 at Albuquerque. That's going to be kind of warm. Even warm in Salt Lake City. Maybe a little bit warm in Wyoming. So got 78 there at, I guess that's China Lake. I don't know, I'd probably be tempted to put the front kind of maybe like this. So basically from Wyoming to California, somewhere in there. 500 millibar analysis, not much change there either. And you can see there's that blocking pattern we talked about. That was a Rex block about a week ago or so. Had a pretty good cutoff flow right in this area, and it's kind of evolved into an omega block. And by omega, it resembles that Greek letter omega. So you see that right there. Block is centered right there on Alaska, right there at about 150 west. So that's got the pattern kind of locked up here. Got the northwesterly flow into the Great Plains. Kind of cold flow coming down here, and you can see the core of the trough over Alberta to Saskatchewan. So that's going to correlate with where some of the cold polar areas over the Canadian prairies. Now another thing you can see here on the 500 millibar chart, remember this is up at about 18,000 feet, we can see some major shortwave troughing through the central U.S. See right here? Maybe a bit of a negative tilt trough. And maybe a little trough offshore. Another trough off the east coast here. And in between those, we have to remember we also have ridges. A lot of people tend to forget that, so I'm going to find probably a ridge right there, and maybe a flat ridge. I don't know, probably California. And one reason this is important, if you find the jet core, let's draw that in here. There's our jet coming in from Northern California to Nebraska through Lake Superior. And we have that rule of thumb. You go between the trough and the downstream ridge. Right under the jet, that's going to be where your baroclinicity is. So about Lake Superior, probably going to have a cold front extending out to the plains. So this is kind of what the upper air patterns are supporting thermally. And same picture off the west coast. We can see that there's support for a surface system out here. Got to keep in mind this is this morning, but I think this is a little bit out of phase with the surface systems. I think we found that in Oregon or maybe a little bit further east of there. So they're a little bit out of place there. And let's take a look at that Fort Worth sounding from an hour ago. Big change from yesterday. We've gotten rid of that inversion. Now we've got pretty much tropical air all the way up to column, all the way up to about 40,000 feet. So there's the tropopause, and dry air below that with that westerly flow coming in from the Mexican plateau. We'll take a look a little bit further north to Springfield, Missouri. Kind of a similar picture there. You can see a little bit of cirrus up here with the higher humidities. But they look pretty warm there also. Then going up to Omaha, going just a little bit further north, yeah, we start picking up that frontal inversion. So that's another way you can place those fronts. Just go through the soundings and look for your patterns there. That's just another look at the 500 millibar chart with vorticity. Vorticity, that'll help us find a lot of the shortwave features. So tonight would be right around there. So shortwave from about Duluth down to about Paducah, Kentucky. And the best lift is over the central Great Lakes region right there. So that's where support is for a surface system. Okay, let's see what else we got here. Quick look at the satellite picture. Looks pretty calm offshore. And I think some of that upper air support we talked about has worked onto the California coast. So got a little bit of shower activity right there. And the SPC mesoscale analysis, that was showing that there's showers right there over Sacramento down to the Bay Area and down around Stockton and maybe just north of Fresno. But you can see the bulk of the upper level lift has worked inland, and that's over the Salt Lake City, Boise, Winnemucca, Elko area right in here. So that's where the bulk of the upper level lift is. Okay, let's see here. Let me take a quick look at the chat here. Get my windows straightened out here. And see who we got on. We got Kevin. Kevin is in Tennessee. Got Alexi from Central Texas. And Eddie. Eddie, I don't know where you're from. If you feel like sharing that, you can go ahead and post that. I got Ron from Southern California. And Alexi, yeah, Alexi again from Central Texas. Jeff. Jeff is from Tallahassee. We have Sue from Bloomington, Indiana. Got Andrew, I don't know where you're from either. Mike Bexley, I can't remember you either. Michael, yeah, I'm not sure about you either. Eduardo, hello, I'm doing pretty good. How are you? And Sarah also in Indiana right there. Eddie is in Tennessee. Let me just stick that on my note there in case I forget. And Andrew is in Peoria. And Mike is in Columbus. All right. Sarah there in Indiana saying it got up to the mid-40s for a high today with showers and very windy. See if we can show that on the 500, I'm sorry, on the thickness chart. There we go. We can see that cold air advection into Indiana right there. So that's the thing about cold air advection. You're bringing in cold air over a warm surface. You're going to destabilize it from the ground upward. So you get kind of a cold over warm situation. That's very conducive to vertical motion, and you're going to get gusty winds as the atmosphere tries to overturn that. And that's mostly confined to the lowest couple thousand feet. So cold air right through here, and blasting that cold air straight in there through Indiana. All right, Andrew in Peoria says Lincoln had winds 65 knots at 925 millibars. That's going to be up at about 2,500 feet. Low-level clouds were screaming north. And Sue there in Indiana, wind gust to 45, severe thunderstorms tonight, front going through southern Indiana. So maybe I'll pull up the SPC mesoscale discussion, or I'm sorry, the maps. We'll shift that out to the Midwest. I don't know if we can go any further east than that. I guess we'll just work with that here. But yeah, you can see these weak squall lines working in through around Toledo down to about Dayton. And we've got a Ford leading edge one from southeastern Ohio to about Lexington. No, not Lexington. Yeah, I guess that'd be about Lexington. I'm not really up on my Kentucky geography here. But where are those fronts going to be? We can take a look at the surface observations and kind of get a rough idea where that is. Okay, we pin down the warm sector. That's going to be these 50s. And also dew points. Dew points are up in the 40s here. And the south wind. So that's going to be your warm sector right there ahead of this leading edge line here. It looks like some of these plots here that may also be part of the warm air mass. Probably a little bit of outflow from this MCS. And then the cold air, that's obviously out here. 10s and 20s with strong westerly wind and dew points in the 20s and teens. So that air is originating from central Canada right there. So ignoring the outflow around these MCSs, this is probably what's going on, something like that. And that places the main front right through this region, and you see these stations here? That kind of matches up there. These stations here, these are not as affected by outflow. So you can kind of use these as your litmus test where the front is. So what kind of CAPE would you use to assess these storms? Well, one question might be, do we have a warm front? Do we have an overrunning situation? We don't know that for sure, so I'm going to take a quick look at a sounding around maybe Charleston. I guess we don't have a Charleston sounding, do we? We've got Wilmington for... Let me take a look at Wilmington for this morning before that line came through. And yeah, looks like we've got a bit of an overrunning situation there earlier today. Let me go down to Nashville. Because whether you have an overrunning situation or not, that's going to depend on whether you're going to look at CAPE with parcels based in the upper levels. Because as you can see here at Nashville, this is definitely an overrunning situation. Got a frontal inversion right there. So if you take the lowest 150 millibars and do mixed layer CAPE, you're going to have some very cold parcels going up into the storm. That's not going to be representative. You're going to want to use the most unstable CAPE, which would be parcels based here. Those are the ones you're going to want to lift, elevated parcels. So in this situation, we're probably going to want to look at the most unstable CAPE. So we'll go back here and go to the thermodynamics menu, most unstable, and there we go. Okay. Now I believe these blue values, I think those are convective inhibition values. The actual CAPE is right here. So we're looking at some pretty low values. And let me check and see if I can compare that with the mixed layer. And you can see the values are much lower because you're lifting cold air down near the surface. So that's why you want to use a mixed layer, or I'm sorry, most unstable in this kind of situation. So pretty much no severe weather potential. We might want to check the storm relative helicity. And for that, we're going to have to go to the wind shear panel. Storm relative helicity, surface to 1 kilometer. And we've got some pretty high values, up near 800. And that kind of ties in to what Mike or Andrew was saying about those 65 knots at 925 earlier today. That's that very strong shear with winds just off the surface like that. Lower level winds a lot slower near the surface. And that's a good recipe for curved photographs. So even though we have very low instability, let me see if I can show you this diagram real quick. This is kind of a famous diagram. Let's see if I can pull this up. CAPE versus shear. Actually, we'll try CAPE SRH. See if I can get this to come up here. I like how the first hit for that here is Cape Cod Rehab Hospital. So I guess that's for the storm chasers who are burned out. Okay, yeah, this is a diagram here. This is kind of what I'm looking for. I can't really zoom that out. Let's try. Yeah, okay, see, this is basically your CAPE here. Increasing instability on the x-axis, increasing shear on the y-axis. So these are increasing values of helicity, and we've got values today up near 800. And this is showing us that the distribution favors either high capes and low instability or high instability and low capes. So these are basically where your tornado events are found. And your stronger outbreaks are going to be kind of in here. So even with very low instability, all we need is some very strong helicity to get, some isolated tornadoes going. And this is kind of a mysterious area, very difficult to forecast, and we get a lot of weird situations when the cape is very low and the helicities are very high, like today. So this is where you really have to keep an eye on the mesoscale picture and watch out for any storms that are not part of the line. In other words, where they get isolated and cell competition goes down. But things today pretty homogeneous in the horizontal, and most of the instability is pretty high aloft. It's pretty tough to get tornadoes with elevated instability. So anyway, that's one thing to look at right there. Give me just a second here. Okay. Let me take one quick look at the chat before we get into the rest of the forecast. So in Indiana, said thunderstorms went through at 8 o'clock. Lights flickered. Glad she still has power. Fred mentions low top storms. Fred, I don't know where you are, but if you feel like sharing that, definitely post that. No soundings from Indiana. I can probably try to show that to you real quick. Yeah, we've got no soundings for Indiana because in their great wisdom, the Weather Service has not really filled in the area between Lincoln and Wilmington with any radiosonde data. So that's why we're having to use Wilmington here. And you can see earlier today, this morning, overrunning situation. And as far as a Lincoln sounding, I'm not really sure what things looked like at 6 in the morning this morning. I don't know if the front was past there or not. The sounding suggests that the air mass was still kind of like warm air overrunning. And that kind of ties into what Andrew was saying earlier. And Sarah says they used to do, I guess, radiosonde data at Grissom when it was an Air Force base. Yeah, I remember when I was in the Air Force at Chanute, in training there, Grissom, which is near Bunker Hill, Indiana, they were responsible for our warnings there in eastern Illinois. Okay, and Fred mentions low-top supercells common in the upper Midwest. Okay, yeah, with this type of weather pattern, definitely. So let's go ahead and head into the forecast since we're about 24 minutes in, and we'll take a look at what we've got over the next week. So there goes our front in through Ohio at 0Z. That moves off very quickly into New York, and warm air advection the cold air advection focuses on the Great Lakes. So now we've got the warm front coming up through Iowa, kind of a stationary front through Wyoming and Idaho. And the frontal positioning is a little bit difficult to find through Nevada and California. So we're going to go with something like that. So by the time we do the webcast tomorrow, our cold front in Iowa and Nebraska will sink south. It's going to look kind of like that. Got a low pressure area here, maybe a bit of lee side troughing in New Mexico, and maybe even a bit of a dry line forming through here. So those are the ingredients we're going to look at. We do have southerly flow here in Texas, but you can see the gradient has kind of pulled the flow around to southwesterly. And that's a pattern that brings a lot of warm air and moisture up into the Mississippi River Valley. This is the type of pattern we had on the super outbreak of 74, April 3rd. Deep southwesterly flow coming up into Indiana, Kentucky, and Illinois. Give me just another second here. Okay, things calming down out into the Pacific a little bit. But we are watching the upper levels as we get towards Friday and Saturday. I'm going to show that to you in a minute. Thursday's webcast, we get the front pushing south into Oklahoma and Texas, and there comes our cold air mass. Things actually picking up a little bit in the Pacific, and now I can see a bit of a comma shape. So it looks like our main upper support is moving onshore here. And there's that cold core we were talking about yesterday coming into the San Joaquin Valley. So this is where we kind of watch for the possibility of low-top supercells out there. Maybe a few brief tornadoes if we have enough instability out there. That would be towards Friday and Saturday. For Friday's webcast, Friday evening, we're going to be looking at something like that. More cold air pushing southward. Got a bit of isentropic lift with the southerly gradient. See that southerly gradient to the south? That's going to overrun this cold air mass. So that's plenty of lift, and our precipitation is going to form up into a band there. And where we have sufficient cold air near the surface, we're going to get freezing rain. Looks like the cold core has moved into the San Diego area by Friday. So that's going to clear out in California and Central California. And things will be moving into Arizona here on Friday evening. So you can see that moving through the southern Rockies. And by the time we do the webcast on Saturday, that front will be creeping south into the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So cold air advection coming in like that. And you can see the strong overrunning pattern. Got very strong cyclogenesis out here, pressure falls, and that pulls the flow around to southeasterly. If you look at the 850 millibar chart, you would definitely see that there. And you see these very low thicknesses. That's a good indication we've got a front or an upper level jet set up like that. And let me show that to you on Saturday. This is Saturday evening's webcast. Okay, Saturday evening looking like that. Cut off low over southern Arizona near Ajo and Tucson. And you can see this little slug of vorticity right south of Arizona there. And here's that jet coming into the El Paso area. So with this kind of situation, we're going to look for the comma cloud to kind of look like that. And that matches up pretty well with the surface data. So our upper support in the surface patterns are kind of coming into phase here. And as that comes out into the plains, it dumps all that energy into this system out here, and things really get cranking in west Oklahoma and northwest Texas. So we're going to see that warm front kind of lift northward through Oklahoma. Looks like the GFS is going with that trend we saw yesterday of shifting the precip to the north. So this puts Omaha, Goodland, and Lamar in the threat area right there. It looks like showers and thunderstorms here for the I-35 area on Sunday. So that'll move eastward during the day on Monday. You can see that squall line right there along the front. and that'll gradually move eastward on Tuesday. Looks like the Pacific Northwest really opens up here. See that very strong gradient there in Oregon and Washington. That's going to mean strong winds for that area. This is going to be on Tuesday. Then on Wednesday, we have another system coming on shore. Things look pretty quiet in Texas. Then for Thursday the 19th, you can see the thickness banding starting to really firm up here in the desert southwest. So it looks like we've got a front which has moved down into this area here. And so we're going to have an upper level trough through this area. And then for the weekend, pretty good development here in Arizona. Looks like most of the baroclinicity off to the south, though. And that's where we have development in Texas, down along the Gulf Coast on Sunday. Yeah, you see that right there. So that'll be the next big weather event coming up into the southeastern U.S. This is going to be Monday the 23rd. And now we're starting to get kind of out of range of the models. Okay, that's probably about all I got here. My voice is starting to get kind of shot here, so I think I'll just wrap it up here. Do I use earth.nullschool for weather information? I haven't seen that yet. I'll have to take a look at that. I appreciate letting me know about that. And all right, I guess we'll just wrap it up there. I appreciate you watching, and I wanted to mention to please like, comment, and subscribe when the archive comes online of this show. These things are pretty important to me if we want to keep the channel going. That's kind of like the support that would definitely help us out. Anyway, I hope the rest of your night's awesome. Please keep analyzing those maps, and I guarantee you will be an expert. Thanks, and we'll see you tomorrow night. .30